The most terrifying part of this movie isn't the man-eating killer. It is a man with a mouth full of civilization, railroads, and the future, who can package massacre as progress and frame robbery as development. He is a man who can factor the lives of an entire land into his own get-rich scheme. A young prosecutor originally believed in the law, in trials, and in the idea that as long as criminals were sent to court, the world would slowly get better. But when he saw with his own eyes his brother's brutal death, his sister-in-law and nephew kidnapped, Native Americans being framed, and the army being used as a slaughtering blade, he finally understood one thing. If the law has already been bought by evil men, should a good man continue to follow the rules? If it were you facing such a situation, would you continue to trust the courts, or would you put on a mask and personally stop this train heading toward hell? The story begins in San Francisco in 1933. A boy walks into a Wild West exhibition, where the past of the West has been turned into exhibits. There are bison, grizzly bears, and an old Native American man standing in a glass display case. He has a dead crow on his head and his face is written with the dust and years of time, looking like someone forgotten from an old era. The boy recognizes him, Tonto, the legendary man who fought alongside the ranger to rob banks.
Ladies and gentlemen, my colleague and I will be making a withdrawal.
But the boy doesn't believe the legends because he heard that the ranger and Tonto were good men, and how could good men rob banks? The old man looks at him and says only one thing. In those days, the good men wore masks. The time shifts back to 1869 in Colby, Texas. The railroad is aggressively pushing toward the west. The tracks are being laid across the desert and into people's imaginations. The businessman Latham Cole stands before the crowd and announces a major piece of news.
Make no mistake, law and order has come to the Wild West, which is why I am bringing notorious outlaw and Indian killer Butch Cavendish here to Colby.
He also guarantees everyone that as long as no war breaks out, the land treaties with the Comanches will be honored. The words are spoken beautifully, and the applause is enthusiastic.
You can see it firsthand, the band.
But many disasters on this land often begin with a phrase like, "for the sake of the future." On this very day, a train heading to Colby is carrying a man about to be executed. The man-eating killer, Butch Cavendish. This man is notorious. Rumors say he ate human hearts during the war, and even the Texas Rangers know that if he escapes, the border will never know peace. On the same train, there are two others whose fates are about to be rewritten. One is named John Reid. He has just returned to his hometown, prepared to serve as the local prosecutor. While others carry guns on their hips, he carries a copy of 2 treatises of government. The other is Tonto. He is locked in a prison car wearing a dead crow on his head and muttering words others cannot understand. He stares fixedly at Cavendish, not as if looking at a prisoner, but as if looking at a monster that crawled out of hell. Tonto calls him a Wendigo. Cavendish pries off an iron nail with his bare hands, revealing a pistol hidden under the floorboards. Cavendish begins his escape plan.
This break, boss.
Tonto keeps giving hints to alert the guards, but by the time the guards notice, it is already too late. Before the train reaches the station, Cavendish's gang strikes to hijack the prisoner. Gunfire erupts, the carriage falls into chaos, the train loses control, and passengers scream, yet the tracks at the end of the line have not even been finished. In the critical moment when Cavendish intends to eliminate Tonto, John suddenly arrives. It is his sudden appearance that gives Tonto, who is nearby, the chance to fight back. Tonto wants to take the opportunity to kill Cavendish, but John stops him, because John believes that even a demon like this should stand trial. One believes in the law, the other believes only in revenge. 2 people who absolutely should not stand together are thus locked into the same disaster by fate. In the end, Cavendish escapes, and the train nearly causes a catastrophe.
That's reinforced Bethlehem steel. That's the end of the line.
We jump.
What about the passengers?
They jump.
There are children on board!
All jump.
Just as the two are at a loss for what to do, the pursuing rangers approach the train. The man who climbs onto the train is named Dan Reid, who is also the brother of the prosecutor John. He knows the situation is dire. If the train continues to speed, all the passengers will lose their lives. The urgent priority is to stop the train immediately, so several of them work together to loosen the couplings at the front of the engine, allowing the detached carriages to slow down. However, the locomotive continues to race forward until it reaches the end of the unfinished tracks, where the engine flips over. John and Tonto luckily survive, but the first thing John does is arrest Tonto in the name of the Texas government. This is John. Even though the world has turned into such a mess, he still wants to follow legal procedures first. After returning to Colby, John meets Dan's wife, Rebecca, and his son, Danny, seeing the home John has always envied. Between John and Rebecca, there seems to be an unspoken past, but now that she is his brother's wife, many words can only be hidden in their glances. After Cavendish escapes, Dan decides to lead a team to hunt him down. John disagrees with vigilante justice. He emphasizes over and over that Cavendish must be captured and sent to trial, not executed on the spot. Dan doesn't argue with his brother. He simply hands a ranger badge to John, appointing him as a Texas Ranger. From this moment on, John is no longer just a prosecutor. He is also dragged into the most dangerous rules of the West. The 8-man ranger team sets out. The man leading the way is named Collins, a tracker Dan has known for years who also speaks Indian languages. Everyone assumes he can lead them to Cavendish. No one expected that where he leads them is not to a lead, but to a graveyard. The team walks into a canyon with no cover. The next second, gunfire erupts from all sides. Rangers fall one by one, horses neigh, and bullets shatter the rocks. John doesn't know how to use a gun and can only try his best to survive in the chaos. Dan is shot. John rushes over trying to drag his brother away, but Dan can no longer hold on. Before he dies, he tells John, "Rebecca has always loved you. Take care of her for me." This sentence is heavier than any final testament, because it is not just an entrustment, it is also a forceful tearing open of the thing John dared not face in his heart. But the more cruel part is yet to come. Cavendish appears. He looks at Dan as if looking at a prey he has waited for a long time. Then, this madman cuts out Dan's heart. The desert falls quiet again, leaving only the dead, the vultures, and the wind. When Tonto arrives, he silently buries the dead rangers one by one, then strips anything useful from their bodies. When he comes to John, he never expected that John would still be alive. Tonto steps in to save the dying John. After some medical treatment, John wakes up. Tonto believes this is the arrangement of the spirits. He says the spirit horse chose John, and since John went to the other world and returned, he is a spirit walker, a man who is not meant to die. John, of course, does not believe in these things. He has just crawled back from the edge of death, and his mind is filled only with his brother's body, the safety of Rebecca and Danny, and that Cavendish who cut out Dan's heart. Tonto gives him a silver bullet saying Cavendish is a Wendigo, and a Wendigo can only be killed with silver. So John intends to head to the town to gather men, but Tonto immediately stops him. Tonto takes out Dan's vest and uses the bullet that killed Dan to cut out a piece of cloth, making a black mask.
You want me to wear a mask?
The men you seek think you are dead, Kimosabe. Better to stay that way.
All right. But if we ride together, it's to bring these men to justice in a court of law. Is that understood?
The two travel together temporarily because their goals are aligned. Find Cavendish and find the traitor in the ranger team. They first go to see a woman named Red. Red runs a place filled with all sorts of people. Her prosthetic leg is made of ivory, and her words are as sharp as a knife. She knows Tonto, and also knows many secrets that men dare not bring to the table. From Red's mouth, John learns a key clue. Collins had once come here with Dan, and the two had a huge argument. The reason for the argument was that they had discovered something in the desert. Red pulls out a stone. In Colby, this looks like just a broken rock, but if it were shipped to San Francisco, it would be worth $1,000. John then realizes that his brother's death might not have been a simple failure of a manhunt. Cavendish's escape, the ambush of the Rangers, and the accusations against the Comanches could all be related to this stone. Because this is not a stone, this is silver. On the other side, Cavendish's men begin attacking border residents. They burn houses, kill innocent people, and deliberately stage the scenes to look like the work of Comanches. John and Tonto, arriving late, see that something is wrong. Tonto says that Indians are like coyotes. Even when they kill, they don't waste. But the slaughter at the scene was chaotic, greedy, and crude, not at all the way of the Comanches. This is not a war. This is a frame-up. And the purpose of the frame-up is to make the war actually break out. As long as the treaty is invalid, the railroad can pass through the Comanche reservation and keep pushing forward. And the place the tracks are truly headed is that silver mine hidden deep in the desert. At this time, Rebecca and Danny are also captured by Cavendish's men. John gets desperate. He and Tonto follow the spirit horse through the desert. On the way, they argue, get lost, and become dehydrated, nearly dying in the wilderness. John questions Tonto in a breakdown.
This is fantastic, isn't it? Now Cavendish is out there somewhere doing God knows what to Rebecca and Danny, and I'm gonna die here in the desert with you and that ridiculous bird!
Just when he thinks everything is over, they discover the railroad tracks. The tracks have already been laid into the Comanche land. Cole stands before the crowd and grandly announces that in order to help the Comanches escape ignorance, the railroad will continue to advance. From now on, the treaties with the Indians are void. You see, real robbers never say they are robbing. They say it is progress. Soon, John is captured by the Comanches. There he finally hears Tonto's true past. Many years ago, Tonto was a child. He rescued 2 white men in the desert and brought them back to his tribe to heal. Later, those 2 white men discovered a massive silver mine at the source of the river and asked Tonto where that place was. They used a cheap pocket watch to make a trade with a child. Tonto did not understand greed. He thought a trade was just a trade. So he took them to the silver mine. But after those 2 white men discovered the silver mine, in order to keep the secret for themselves, they slaughtered Tonto's entire tribe. Tonto survived, but he could never go back to the past. He could not accept that he had exchanged the lives of his entire clan for a single watch, so he called those 2 white men Wendigos, believing they were not human, but monsters consumed by the evil spirits in the silver mine. So is Tonto crazy? Perhaps he is, but his madness grew out of a pile of corpses. John finally understands that what Tonto is hunting is not a monster, but a nightmare that has not ended for over 20 years. John and Tonto are buried in the sand by the Comanches, left to fend for themselves in the desert. Just then the cavalry arrives. They shout for God and country, opening fire on the Comanches. They think they are eliminating savages, but they don't know they are just the blades being held by Cole. This is the coldest part of the entire movie. Many hands that kill don't even know why they are killing. The elusive spirit horse comes to John and rescues the 2 of them. After John and Tonto escape, they finally find the source of the river and the silver mine. Cavendish is in the mine shaft, forcing workers to continue mining. He wants to take all the silver away, leaving not even a scrap behind. At this time, a worker claims to have seen a ghostly figure in the cave, so he tells Frank to go into the cave to investigate. As the minecart slowly leaves the tunnel, Cavendish approaches out of curiosity to check, only to find a bundle of lit dynamite inside. Then Tonto and John emerge from the depths of the mine and capture Cavendish. Tonto takes out the silver bullet, wanting to kill this Wendigo he has chased his whole life, but John stops him.
Finish him.
No. This isn't justice.
Justice is what a man must take for himself.
No, I can't believe that. I won't.
Wendigo cut out brother's heart. Where is brother's justice?
John cannot answer, but he still cannot bring himself to do it, because in his belief, the moment he crosses that line, he will become the same kind of person as Cavendish. The 2 break off completely.
You sold out your whole village for a watch. And now you're an outcast. You're banned apart, a messed up little kid who couldn't live with what you did. There's no such thing as cursed silver, or a spirit walker for that matter. I'm not like you. I have a tribe.
You have nothing like me.
You're wrong.
I do not need you. See the face of my people as you die.
John takes Cavendish to see Cole. He thinks he has finally done the right thing, handing the criminal over to the civilized order and bringing the truth to the people who can handle it. But the true nightmare begins right here. When Cole sees Cavendish, he is neither shocked nor angry. He is too calm, because they were partners all along. In fact, Cole says they are like brothers. Only then does John understand that Dan had long ago discovered the secret of the silver mine and the railroad, and knew Cole wanted to provoke a war and tear up the treaty, so Dan had to die. The Ranger team had to die. The Comanches had to be framed as mass murderers. Cavendish was responsible for the killing. Cole was responsible for packaging the killing as civilization. One is like a beast, the other like a gentleman. But the blood on the gentleman's hands is not a drop less than the beast's.
Captain, arrest these men.
This man is a common criminal trespassing on railway property.
Comanche never raided any settlements. They staged the attack so they could violate the treaty.
We've heard enough. Captain?
You represent the United States government. You do not work for this man.
Captain?
They started this war!
Well, if what you say is true, that would mean I attacked the Comanche for no reason.
That's right, Captain. Slaughter of the innocents. Their blood on your hands. Tenfold. Are you capable of that?
Well, the way I see it, these men are with the railroad. So the question is, who the hell are you?
At this moment, John finally wakes up. If a man like Cole represents the law, then he would rather be an outlaw. The meaning of the mask has changed. It is no longer just a piece of cloth to hide his identity, but proof of John's break from this rotten order. In the mine, Cole prepares to publicly execute John by shooting.
Hell is that? Gas. That's gas! Get out! Gas! Get out! That's gonna blow!
Gas leaks, danger draws nearer, and death presses down on everyone's head. At the critical moment, Tonto returns. He saves John and stands by his side once again, because they both understand that neither of them is perfect. John believed too much in the law, and Tonto believed too much in revenge.
Everything.
But this time, the one they have to deal with is the same true monster. The celebration for the completion of the railroad at Promontory Point begins. All the powerful figures, shareholders, and businessmen are there. Applause, champagne, and speeches package this grand event to look decent and glorious. Cole prepares to complete the final step. He wants to transport carloads of raw silver to a San Francisco bank. Every car is filled with the purest silver, totaling $65 million in value. Once the railroad company goes public, he will become the major shareholder, truly in control of everything. This is no railroad dream. This is using the entire West as a gambling table, using countless lives to trade for his own personal kingdom. But Cole did not expect that John and Tonto have already made their move. Red brings people to cooperate, and Tonto blends into the scene.
It's magnificent. So clean.
You want to touch it?
Oh, yes. Robbery.
We don't have no money here, boy.
Train robbery.
The train starts moving. The chase begins. On one side is Cole's silver transport train, and on the other is John and Tonto's counterattack. Tracks intersect, carriages fly, and bullets whiz past shadows. Rebecca and Danny are still in danger, and Cavendish is also on the train waiting for John. This time, John does not retreat. He can choose not to be an executioner, but he will never again be a lamb manipulated by others. He fights Cavendish on top of the train. This demon who killed Dan and cut out Dan's heart is finally forced into a dead end by John. Cavendish mocks him, saying he is nothing more than a man in a mask. But John is no longer that prosecutor who only knew how to recite books. He uses his fists, his courage, and the conviction he finally woke up to send this nightmare onto the runaway train. On the other side, Tonto also faces Cole. This man who destroyed his childhood, destroyed his tribe, and destroyed countless others finally stands before him. Tonto returns the shadow of that pocket watch to destiny. The bad trade should finally come to an end. The train crashes toward the broken bridge. Silver, power, conspiracy, and lies all lose control in the roar of steel. Cavendish dies in defeat, and Cole goes to his destruction along with his wealth. That train indeed sped toward the future. Except it was their hell. After the dust settles, everyone thanks the masked man. They call him the Ranger. They want to give him a medal. They want him to take off the mask. And they want to put him back into the social order. But John refuses, because he has already seen the filthiest side of that order. He knows that once some kinds of justice take off their masks, they will be tamed by power. Once some people sit in a respectable position, they can no longer fight the evil behind that respectability. Rebecca understands that he cannot stay. Danny has also grown up. John tells Danny to take good care of his mother, then mounts Silver and says goodbye to Tonto. He is no longer that lawyer who only believes in books, nor is he just Dan's brother. He has become the Ranger, a man who lives on the edge of the law but guards the bottom line of justice. The story returns to 1933. After hearing all this, the boy is still half doubting. He asks Tonto, Wendigos, spirit walkers, the masked man, could it all just be a story? Tonto does not explain. Because what is truly important has never been whether the legends are true or false. What matters is, when the world forces you to believe that evil men represent civilization, plunder represents progress, and silence represents maturity, do you still dare to put on your own mask and stand on the opposite side? This is the most interesting thing about the Lone Ranger. It is not about how a hero becomes stronger, but how a person who believes in rules prevents himself from turning into a monster after the rules have collapsed. Tonto spent his life hunting the Wendigo. John spent his life guarding that line. One was trapped by the past, one was shattered by faith. But when they ride toward the wilderness side by side, you will find that the true Ranger is never truly alone. He simply chose not to be part of the corruption of this world. If the law stands on the side of the wicked, will you still continue to believe in the law? Or will you be like John, put on the mask and personally take back justice?